Fabula Ultima by Emanuele Galletto, published by Neat Games, is, well, it should be obvious just from looking at the front cover, a tabletop RPG heavily inspired by the many JRPG in existence. Also, this TTRPG is written by an Italian, so I guess you can call this a spaghetti JRPG, starring Clint Eastwood. So, what is so JRPG about Fabula Ultima? For starters, it literally plays like one, specifically, the turn-based battle aspect. In combat, or conflict scene, the whole fight basically happens in what a certain someone I know called Battle Egg, where the combatant position doesn't really matter, well, until they do I guess, and you just beat the crap out of each other until either results happen. And much like every JRPG or just turn-based RPG adventure in general, everyone on field gets to only have one action, like attack, guard, overturn your bag for that healing potion when you really need it, cast a spell, and others. It basically just plays out like any turn-based RPG, except in TTRPG format, with some considerations for balance, like turn order between PC and NPC still being switched around every turn instead of having your group getting smacked by lightning skeletons to the death before you can do anything, though getting repeatedly smashed by monsters can still happen if your GM put too many enemies on field. Also, instead of you hoarding God knows how many potions and remedies in your gigantic pocket, you instead just get inventory point, which you can then spend on potions to give you a fix. This neatly avoid the problem of the player group requiring a goddamn spreadsheet to keep track of their inventory, because I know many of you RPG enthusiasts out there tend to hoard more than enough amount of super expendable items, and then you barely use it even against the final boss because you thought there's an even final boss. That's totally a worry. Instead, you might need a spreadsheet for something else, more on that later. But right now, let's talk about how to start your campaign. First, your group should decide on the theme of your setting, because there's no core setting for Fabula Ultima. You can decide on themes like high fantasy filled with magic at every corner, natural fantasy full of small villages coexisting with the beasts and the wilderness, and techno fantasy that was torn apart by greed on a land that's living on borrowed time. The game master could then work on the finer details, like the empires and kingdoms that inhabit the land, historical events that happened here, mysteries and threats that are still around, and more. You could even do this through the random generation system, just for convenience. There's also a map sheet for the GM to track every important spot and the player's location at once, which is very nice because I do not trust my map making skill at all. Now that a world has been made, let's talk about characters. First up, you want to pick an identity, a title that neatly summarizes your character, origin, where in the setting your character comes from, and theme, a strong ideal or emotion that drives your character's action. These can be important role-playing choices, because you can invoke these traits by using Fabula Point to reroll dice if your traits fit the situations. Fabula Points basically represent the player character's ability to influence fate and destiny itself through their action, and other than invoking traits, it can also be used to alter the story, invoke bonds your character has with others to add bond strength to the role, or just use a powerful skill that requires it. Essentially, Fabula Points can be used to save your butt in critical moment, but at the same time, you don't want to hoard them, because using Fabula Points also directly contributes to the amount of experience you earn in a session, making you stronger and thereby possibly making you less dependent on it to save your mistake. Next up is of course, everyone's favorite, classes. Interestingly enough, Fabula Ultima is probably the only tabletop RPG I know where it wants the players to mix their class up from the get-go, because you immediately start at level 5, and you put these levels into at least 2 class and 3 at max, which mean from the start, you are already stepping into at least 2 classes. That sounds a bit complicated, but don't worry, let me summarize the classes for you. In Fabula Ultima, there's technically 3 class types: the martial class, that's all about beating the crap out of people, unlocking the ability to equip martial items, which are stronger in a lot of ways than normal items. This includes Darkblade, edgy people that can use the power of hate to defeat their foes; Fury, who use the power of getting shit kicked out of them to defeat their foes; Guardian, this is all you need to know about them; Sharpshooter, this is all you need to know about them;
Gun,
and Weapon Master, for people that just wants to swing a sword really good. Next is the Magic class, which of course, is all about magic, granting you spells and unlocking the ability to perform rituals. This includes Arcanist, which is just fucking stand user; Chimerist, you are now a Pokemon; Elementalist, this is probably the easiest one to figure it out; Entropist, make time, space, and probability your servants; and Spiritist, the medic. Finally, there's Support class, Technical class, I honestly not sure what to call these, but they are very unique classes that don't fit in any categorization at all due to their unique ability. This includes the Lore Master, whose knowledge is literally power, Orator, you can sass someone to oblivion, Rogue, you can now steal items, the Initiative, or your own presence, Tinkerer, about to invent someone's worst nightmare, and Wayfarer, you can have a big dog. With these 15 classes, you really can just make your character into whatever you want. However, do note that not all classes are made equally. I don't mean that in balanced sense, I mean it in the amount of stuff you can do sense. For example, this is the Fury class page, that's it, it's just one page, and simple to understand. Meanwhile, if you pick most of the magic class or one of the technical class, you might get a Bible thrown at your face, possibly literally for the spiritist. All magic classes also unlock the ability to perform rituals. Essentially, it's for using your magic to perform role-playing checks, which can be as small as lighting up fire at a distance, to make it rain for the whole valley, so that's even more pages of stuff to understand. The most hilarious example probably comes from the Tinkerer, because other than the already extensive lists of things you can do as a Tinkerer, you also have the ability to start project, which allows the Tinkerer to create custom creations, which can also go all the way up in scale, from magnetic boot, to a goddamn airship, and this is only available to Tinkerer and Tinkerer only. I'm not saying these are bad, but it's also kinda hilarious how some classes are clearly more capable of extreme shenanigans compared to other classes. Also, you can only add 10 levels to a class, at which point it is considered as mastered and you can no longer add more level into it, so choose your skills wisely. You also get to pick a heroic skills upon mastering a class, which can be class specific or not, and after that, you can pick a new class to master, or not. You get to only have 3 unmastered classes at any given time, and the maximum level is 50, so you got a long way to go. And after all that, you finally get to decide on your attribute dices, which you will be using for a lot of checks, like accuracy, damage, magic, or other role-playing stuff, and all of these will be done with double dice rolls in Fabula Ultima. Later on, you can also start forming bonds, a sort of emotion power a player character can feel towards someone. There's 6 types of bonds, and these can includes both admiration and hatred, so bond can apply to someone you want to kill too, and as mentioned above, you can invoke the bond with a Fabula point to pass a check. You also have a starting budget of 500 zenith, the currency in the game, to buy your equipment, much like any JRPG, mostly for armor and weapons, and the leftover will be added to your initial savings, and you will need it because as it turns out, being alive costs money. Yes, with how big the number can be, you will be spending some time accounting on your budget, especially for a Tinkerer. Finally, after creating your characters, your group also gets to decide on a prologue, essentially, why your group is together in the first place, and now you can actually start playing the TTRPG. So, let's talk about threats. Like in many JRPG, the world is filled with adventures and monsters that would have been dangerous to unarmed villagers. Luckily, you are anything but unarmed. The book comes with a bestiary filled with NPC from level 5 to 30, which should be enough for most normal encounters, but just in case, it also comes with the NPC creation system so you can make your own NPC or even bosses. One thing you need to know on the NPC is that a lot of them have elemental weakness and resistance, so it's a good idea to learn an enemy weakness and strength, and then use proper elemental attack to hit them harder, which can be a bit complicated because for some reasons this TTRPG has 8 damage types, which just seems hilariously excessive. There's also another enemy type, villains. Villains are powerful enemy NPC that can give a hard fight to the players. They also have a thing called Ultima Point, a resource they can use to invoke their trait, recover, or even just get out of dodge. To get the players to fight the villain instead of wandering all over the place completing side quests, I recommend making the villain memorable.
Bullshit.
Or use a clock system to remind the players that the villain is always planning something. Upon depleting their Ultima Point, a villain could either surrender, or they escalate, obtaining the next tier of villainy, and basically becoming more powerful for the player to deal with. However, you really want to use this escalation mechanic carefully and rarely. It's more impactful if you use it to tell a new story point, or as part of a climax. You really don't want to use escalation randomly, that's all. And of course, at the end of a dungeon, you might also face a random monster boss. These can also be counted as a minor villain and thus has Ultima Point too, though you probably don't want to escalate these ones. And as if this game isn't JRPG enough, there's mechanic for random encounters during traveling, that might also lead you to discover some previously unknown places to explore, and you will want to, because you will get reward, and experience, but mostly reward. The TTRPG also has system for calculating how much reward should be handed out to the players depending on their number and level, but of course, money reward alone isn't so interesting, so you can consult the rare item design system to make some fancy gears for the players to utilize. These can be upgraded weapons, armors, accessories, and even powerful story-bending artifacts. Remember the part where I said you might need a spreadsheet? This is why. You probably need to make a Google spreadsheet to keep track of what the heck your group has, or you can just sell whatever you don't need, but who the heck am I kidding, you probably will hoard tons of stuff like me. And that's basically everything I could tell you about Fabula Ultima, a TTRPG heavily inspired by every JRPG in existence. Also, one more thing, Fabula Ultima is probably the most GM-friendly combat TTRPG I have ever read. There's tidbits to solve very niche situations that you might encounter on just about everywhere in the book. The GM guide itself feels like the most extensive ones I have read so far, like tips on how to make a proper villain, world building, giving players rare items useful for next session as a foreshadow, and many more. There's even a section for making dungeons, both an extensively designed one that you clearly spend a lot of time on for the players to explore, and an improvised one for when players randomly encounter a previously unknown location so you have to make one like right now in session. That's ingenious. There's also a section for GM to give them a summary of strength, weakness, and role-playing potential of the classes that the players pick, so they can make a world that's even more fun to the players. It's actually really nice to give so many tips and tricks for new GM to learn the ropes with, and as a forever GM, I really appreciate this. Final word, well, the truth is, I have not played a single JRPG in my life so far, no Chrono Trigger, no Final Fantasy, no Persona, and many more. All I know about these games is through cultural osmosis, usually in the form of memes. What I do ended up playing is many JRPG-inspired Western games that their developers make to show their love on JRPG. Fabula Ultima is just another JRPG-inspired Western thing written by someone that loves JRPG, and I love it, I really enjoy it, and I hope you will too. You can get it now on Drive-Thru RPG. Which is probably why it took this long for me to find out about it. itch.io is just more convenient. Sorry. You can also download Fabula Ultima Press Start for free, which is a quick start version of the TTRPG for new players to find if they like Fabula Ultima or not. There's also some extra free contents on Need Games' main website, like the Halloween special that gives you a Necromancer class, which is self-explanatory. The holiday gift brings in new mechanic that basically turns your Fabula Ultima campaign into Monster Hunter, and the April Fool gives you the Ace of Cards class that you literally need a deck of cards to play, which is amusing. Anyway, that's all for now, and I will see you all next time. Hello there, if you like this video, please subscribe to my channel and click that notification bell button. If you really want to support my channel, you could visit my Patreon page, or buy me some coffee, links in the description. Anyway, have a nice day.